I'm Chronix, and this is Mocha Bane from the Most Extreme Wrestling, and we're going to be doing this whole little video series where we talk about something we really care about. That's the WWE announcers. Well, not just WWE, just wrestling announcers in general.
Commentators from far and wide.
Yes, we're going to go back and look at some of the great teams of the past and of the present, and some people in general that we really like, and some people that we think are just god-awful terrible. Just bad. Yeah. Makes us want to change the channel kind of bad. But for this little introduction video, we did want to talk about something that happened pretty recently, and that was Matt Striker being released.
Bad move.
It was a bad move, because it's not like he was terrible.
No, not at all.
I mean, he was good. He threw some facts at us.
Yep.
And we liked that. Apparently somebody in WWE didn't like that. I don't really know what the case was for that, because I mean, he was just entertaining.
Yeah, how would you get rid of a guy that's passionate about his job and passionate about what he's doing? And I think it's cool, as a wrestling fan, you have a guy that talks about Japanese wrestling and realizes that there are independent promotions and other people out there besides just the big corporate machine of WWE. And two, he calls the moves by the proper name. A lot of holes that we don't know about, he calls them by what they really are instead of making some goofy, fake name for a hole that we all know that's not that hole, where it's a front kick, but you call it a Yakuza kick or whatever, it's just terrible.
And plus, he would actually say the move name. He would actually know them instead of just being like, oh, what a move.
And he knows who innovated them, who uses it, who made it popular. It's just, there's nothing better than, the hold is an anaconda vice, but you could tell me what it affects on a guy. It draws me into the story, so I'm like, man, that guy might legitimately be hurt.
Exactly.
Terrible.
And he could come up with something just like that. It didn't matter what it was. It was a Royal Rumble. He would cut, the guy is in the corner, hanging on to the bottom rope. Oh, he's grabbing onto the bottom rope because we're talking about lower leverage. That's giving you the best chance of not getting thrown.
Having a low vertical base so no one can eliminate him easily.
He could just come up with stuff. And that, I think, is missing so much from today's announcers. They don't come up, or the commentators, they don't come up with this stuff out of nowhere. They just say the same old cliche things, but it's like the dude sat home. He did his homework. He knows the moves' names, their origins, and exactly like what you talked about with the submissions. He's like, oh, well, look at this. It's tearing that ACL and that PCL at the same time, just ripping them apart,
And I think that's good, because if you look at other sports besides wrestling, you have your play-by... me majoring in broadcast journalism in college, you have your play-by-play commentator who's just going to call the action how it is. You have your color commentator who put emphasis on what's happening. So usually, if you have a former wrestler who knows what it's like to be in the ring, trained as a professional wrestler, and also, you can have more than one color commentator who can also put in, add their thoughts on what's going on. And so I think it's good that you have the straight up play-by-play man, a color commentator, and an extra person who just throws that occasional tidbit in there, because it doesn't make it bland to watch. And, it just kind of puts a new spin on it, so you kind of think about it from a different perspective.
And see, you brought up a good point, because we're talking about how we like Matt Striker's style, and we're not saying every commentator has to be like him. He served his purpose, and you got other people who have completely different styles that they can bounce back and forth. The same concept of having a heel announcer and a face announcer, where they can have arguments, and then they can do their own thing.
It's about chemistry.
Exactly.
You want to mesh well with who you're working with, and so that's something that's very important, whether you in any aspect of life, whether it's a marriage or on your job, you want to have chemistry.
You don't want to be completely bored by whatever you're seeing in front of your face, because that's just absolutely terrible. But I did want to touch on one thing in this video before we move on and start talking about all these announcers, and that is the fact that it seems like it's impossible these days to even become an announcer, because Matt Striker was a wrestler beforehand, and I think that was way in his favor of him becoming an announcer, because and you don't really have spots. You got Jim Ross, well, he's gone, but you got the King and Cole, and they've been cemented in these spots for years.
Well, and that's in anything like broadcasting, you're going to have that. If you watch the news, you see that the same anchor has been there for 30 years.
True.
With WWE, I noticed that they pluck a lot of, local sports guys that did like news or sports, and then a lot of guys use that as a platform to jump to like ESPN, like Todd Grisham, Jonathan Coachman. A lot, kind of like how some anchors use ESPN to jump to like Good Morning America or the Today Show, but like a lot of like senior sports directors, a lot of those guys end up in WWE, and then you have some wrestlers who may not be used, they may be because you want to look at charisma, someone that's articulate, and someone that really knows what's going on, and quite frankly, excuse my language, with someone that can be Vince McMahon's bitch.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
You think that plays like a major role in it?
Well, I mean, you have to say what he's telling you to say in a little earpiece. I mean, there's only one guy or two guys that I could think about. Really, well, JR pretty much, does what Vince tells him to do. And I have a lot of respect for JR, but Jerry Lawler and Paul Heyman are probably the two people that don't, like they're not afraid to get fired from WWE because they have enough money. They get paid enough where it doesn't affect them anymore.
And it was proven in 2001 that happened with the King.
Yeah, because his wife at the time, the cat, Stacey Carter, she was going to be released, so Jerry quit. And then, they brought in Paul Heyman. And, Jerry Lawler, I grew up around the Memphis area. I mean, Jerry Lawler has a ton of money. It's nothing to him. He can leave wrestling anytime he wants to. He does it because it's what he loves. But, I mean, that's probably a good starting point. Like, some of these, like, looking at some of these commentary teams. Because, Paul Heyman's actually a legit announcer.
That's true. But this is just an introduction. We're going to make another video, several other videos, talking about the good and the bad and the teams. We're going to get right to it right now.
Series.